Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. Today's show we are going to go over a kayaker attack, an attack on a swimmer, an attack on a diver, people body surfing, and we're going to end with a crazy story of somebody who fell off one of those ships and his amazing survival story in the water for about 3 hours. Stick around, going to be a great show. Okay, we're going to start off our show over at the Waiaha Golf Course, which is in Maui, Hawaii, and the date is November 4th of 2012. Marc Riglos, he is 30 years old and he is out doing some spearfishing. He's out 300 to 500 yards offshore in 10 to 15 foot deep water. And the water is turbid. It's a nice day. It's 80 degrees, 79 degrees, but the water's turbid at the time. And he is swimming along, and suddenly at around 8:30 in the morning he feels a tug on his right foot, and he at first says that he thought it was his buddy, and of course he turns around and he can see that this huge tiger shark is chomping and then swallows his swim fin and then starts chewing on his foot and lower leg, around the ankle area. And he goes ahead and strikes the shark multiple times. Shark lets go and swims off. Marc has to swim himself to shore, like I said, 300 to 500 yards, but we're in turbid water, and he says that he has to hold on to his foot because his foot is only connected by a little bit of skin, and he has to hold on to it. He says he almost passed out a few times on the way in. He was crying, he was in pain, probably worried about being attacked again, although he didn't bring that up. And he finally makes it into shore after a half hour. It took him a half hour to do that swim to get into shore while holding his foot. So he makes it to shore, he gets himself in to come take him in, and he goes in for surgery. Now at first they had told his mother he'll never walk again. He had massive damage, not only to his foot that was almost severed, but it severed all the tendons and all the nerves and everything down there. So they go ahead and they operate on him. They have the surgery and they end up putting in rods. He said he had rods sticking out everywhere out of his foot. But they ended up saving his foot, and this update that I'm putting into the video here, it shows it's a year after he had been attacked, and he's already well into recovery. As far as he says, he's 80% use of his leg again. He's out working out and doing other things. So just an amazing thing as far as, you know, anytime they reattach, it just doesn't work in my brain that you can do that, but they can. Obviously, and they saved Marc's foot, and he's absolutely able to use it. Yeah, you're not 100%, but it's a lot better than the alternative, I would say. So this was a 12 to 15 foot tiger shark. He said the rows of teeth were just huge. And yeah, what to do with the tiger shark that size, it's just like this clip here. With the men holding that's about the same size that probably grabbed onto him. That's a huge mouth. So just lucky to be able to walk away from this one, literally. And we're going to put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate, by a 12 to 15 foot tiger shark. Now we're going to head over to Cat K in the Bahamas, and the date on this attack is July 4th of 1996. Michael Beach, he is 24 years old, and he is out doing one of the dives to see sharks. It's the Blackbeard dive cruise, and they go into the water. Now one of the stories is that they go ahead and they get in the water and they form a circle, and the divers are up above the seafloor quite a ways, and the dive instructor supposedly dives down, takes a little stake, and sticks it into the seafloor. It has a dead fish on it, and they all stay up there and they watch these sharks come in from the reef that's around them. So somehow Michael Beach ends up being bit by a reef shark, it sounds like, in his lower left leg, and he ends up with a 6 to 8 inch gash, and they has to go in and get that sewed up. I didn't hear of any tendons, nerves being damaged or any arteries, so He probably just needed stitches to go ahead and fix his leg. The other thing is that there's also reports that he had, and it might be very likely because this is the case where they stopped hand feeding the sharks. Other claims were that he was hand feeding the sharks at the time, which that makes more sense to me than getting in between the bait and the shark. Hand feeding the shark, and the shark ended up nipping him in the leg. He goes in, and I guess they stopped doing, at least on the Blackbeard tours, doing the hand feeding of the sharks. And you don't want to be hand feeding, like if there was a saw blade, but the saw blade could move on its own, and the saw blade could think, at a primitive level compared to us, but it could still move and think. Are you going to put your hand by that saw blade and trust that saw blade not to go forward? That's about the same thing. Don't feed fish to sharks. Don't feed anything to sharks. Leave the sharks be. And that's the story of Michael Beach. We put it down as an attack, not an attempt to predate. 6 to 8 inch gash is probably a decent size, especially a reef shark, good 7 footer, but it could be smaller, but we're going to put him in there anyway, as I believe this is probably a 6 foot reef shark. They're not very big and stocky with very large mouths, so you have to have a pretty big one to have a pretty big gash like that on your leg. So attack, not an attempt to predate, and we will move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to Ship Rock, and that is 2 miles east of Catalina Island, and that's in California. The date is October 5th of 2019. Danny McDaniel, 51 years old. He is out kayaking. He is with a friend. They both have their own kayaks, and it sounds like they're going to do some diving. But right now, they're in the kayak process. So it's 4:30 in the afternoon. They're 150 yards west, so about 145 meters west of Ship Rock at the time that this happens. He's sitting there and he said he felt a push, like a nudge or a push to his kayak. And he says that he glanced to the right. He says the first thing that he saw was the long, back of the shark. So he's looking up the back of this creature all the way up to the front. And as he gets to the head of the shark, it's got his kayak in its mouth, and it's right behind him. So this 19-foot great white, his head is right behind this guy. Now both he and his friend said that neither one, his friend is yelling at him at the time, hit the shark with the paddle. Don't do that. If you do that, you're going to probably ask for a bite. His friend is telling him hit it with the paddle. He just sat there, probably in shock. I'd have a heart attack myself. So it just pushed the kayak, so it hit him with some force, enough that it didn't do the shaking, he said, but it pushed it with enough force that it turned him 180 degrees. Then it let go and swam off. Now him and his buddy, rightly so, are sitting there freaking out, and they don't want to paddle and disturb the water and bring any attack again. So they sat there a little bit without even doing anything. But they end up going in after this attack, and they find that there's teeth marks in the hull, of course, of the kayak, but the shark also left behind 2 teeth for him. So he gets his own great white teeth out of a 19-foot great white shark. I just can't imagine that. 12 foot is just huge to me. So 19, 20 footers are just amazing. It's like, oh no. And to turn and look and kind of do like he said and work your way up the shark to see that its head is right behind you, those teeth, these, forget about it. I would definitely have a heart attack. So what we have here is an attack, not an attempt to predate, a definite souvenir, but they didn't say that the kayak was fatally wounded, so I think it survived. So that's our story of Danny McDaniel, and we'll move on. Okay, for our next attack, we're heading over to Burleigh Heads, which is in Queensland, Australia. The date on this is November 25th. Of 1950. Leo Vincent Ryan, he is 21 years old, and he is out catching some shoots, they call it, doing some body surfing. Swim out, wave comes in, you go ahead and use your body like a board and take it on in. So he's out there on this day, and they're about 120 yards from shore, and he suddenly feels a pull on his buttocks, and he says he thought it was one of his friends, and then the clamping tightened. So a shark grabbed him and then bit, and removed a large portion of his buttocks, and probably during thrashing tossed him aside a little bit, and then he was sitting there, saw the shark swim off and turn and come back. Now he's trying to fight this shark off with both his hands, so Leo goes ahead and puts his hands out. He says he was going to hit the shark and poke it in the eye, and he missed, and both of his hands went into the shark's mouth. The shark took, I believe it's most of his left hand and 2 fingers off his right hand. So he got both of his hands in the shark's teeth and had those bitten off. The shark swam off after that. It turned out to be from a 10-foot great white shark that came in and grabbed him in his buttocks. And I'm not sure, it sounds like this story, they said they were all taking the chute. In one of the stories I saw that they were all in the process. So that would mean the shark grabbed him when he was body surfing. So you don't body surf very fast, but usually you get this when they're waiting on waves and things like that. So this one sounds like it's possibly one of the moving target ones. 10-foot great white is a big great white, and he's lucky that, you know, it wasn't interested in feeding or he'd be in trouble. And we're going to put it down. It's an attack, not an attempt to predate, by a 10-foot great white shark. There was a 10-foot great white shark spotted at a surf carnival they have, and they called it off. So worried probably this is the same shark, which, you know, if it's hanging around and trying to feed close to shore, could be. An attack, not an attempt to predate, 10-foot great white shark. Okay, now we're going to head over to a spot known as Palm Beach North. This is just 5 miles from the last attack we just covered in 1950, and this is just 3 weeks after it. And so we're at Palm Beach North, and the date is December 16th of 1950. Desmond Quinlan, he is 20 years old, and he is with a group of surfers that are swimming and doing body shoots. So they're body surfing their way into shore. And he's out in the water. It's about 4:15 in the afternoon. He's with a group of at least 12 others. Everybody but Quinlan and a friend, another person, catches one of the chutes in, and they're all on their way in. The next chute, the friend takes it in, and he gets almost all the way to shore. It says he turns around and looks, and as he does that, he could hear Quinlan yelling. And he looked around and saw that Quinlan was struggling in the water with something. So he swims his way out there, and another gentleman, another kid jumps in the water, and they swim out there. Two kids swim out to him, and they get to him, and they bring him in, and he does not survive his wounds. He ended up passing away on the beach, probably from loss of blood and shock mix. He ended up having a leg severed completely and very bad bite to his abdomen. So they don't tell what was removed, but they do say this was a horrendous attack and got him in the midsection area. Nobody identified the shark. It wasn't said that they were able to identify the shark through any kind of a tooth fragment or anything. The last one was a great white shark, but they probably have, you know, bull sharks and tiger sharks in the areas too. So it's a real tough one to go through. He ends up a fatality, and this would go down as an attack and an attempt to predate on Desmond Quinlan. We just don't know what size shark or what kind of shark. We definitely know it was large enough that it's entering in our books, which it will. Okay, now we'll finish off our unprovoked attacks over off of Ocean City, and that is in New Jersey. The date is August 30th of 1960. Richard Chung is 25 years old, and he is out off of Ocean City, which he's been out swimming from before. He's practicing for a 26-mile decathlon swim, or 26-mile swim that he's training for. So he's out there, and it's 6 o'clock at night, and he's swimming along about a quarter mile from shore, 30 feet deep water, when suddenly he's bit in the right leg. And luckily for him, not because the shark was so intent on feeding on him, but more to get him in, seeing as you're a quarter mile from shore, with a bite that goes all the way down to the bone, it's going to be tough to swim your way in. Luckily for him, on the shore, there was a witness that had looked out and seen that he was struggling in the water. I don't know if it was while he was being attacked or afterwards. It sounds like while he was being attacked, and notified the two lifeguards. They jumped in a boat quickly and got out to Richard and pulled him up out of the water. His leg was badly mangled, and it was probably one of those ugly, big flap of skin type deals that goes all the way to the bone. That's usually what that ends up being. It doesn't sound like it was removal of the flesh, but those bites are terrible anyway. And with the way they said the leg was mangled, I would think that it was a bite shake or a couple different bites, but probably a bite shake would do all kinds of shredding of the skin around the initial main bite. So he gets himself in. The first thing they did was before they even got in, one of the lifeguards put a tourniquet on his leg, and then he had surgery that night. They didn't say anything about arteries, nerves, tendons, anything like that, or that he lost the leg. So it sounds like he survived it, and they sewed him up, and he would go through the recovery, the rehabilitation you need to do to get your muscles working again once you haven't used them for so long and they've been damaged. So he ends up surviving the attack, and it's an attack, not an attempt to predate. We don't know what kind of shark, but they did say that the top of the shark, the dorsal side of it, so the top side of the shark, was a black and a cream color. Black would make me think great white. Cream color could be a great white. They do have a little bit of brown in them at times, but the way it says cream would throw me into some kind of a weird shark, like maybe even a sandbar, but I don't think they're in cold water. So that's a weird description of a great white right there. And I can't think of what other shark it would be that grabbed onto him, but a real bad bite to the leg, anytime it's going down to the bone through inches of flesh, you're going to have an ugly looking wound from it. So that's our attack on Richard Chung, an attack, not an attempt to predate, don't know what kind of shark. And now we get to finish up with, you don't hear that every day. Okay, before we get to the end of the show, just a couple comments here. I have a bunch of recent, the last 2 weeks, there was just, Australia, what are you doing? There's another time cluster. There's a couple different kind of clusters. We've gone over some that are time clusters, and some that are both time clusters and location clusters, like Papua New Guinea, where they were all pretty close to each other. This would be a time cluster. I guess you would say like what happens in the Keys every once in a while. Florida had 4 or 5 in a matter of a couple weeks. The Long Island, where they had 5 or 6, maybe 7 in a matter of 2 weeks or so. Maybe 5 years ago, something like that. But that's a time cluster, more than real close together, like a few miles. It's 20 miles in between them or so, but the time is the cluster, and that's what we just had over in Australia. I looked into some of them already. Unfortunate, 15-year-old surfer with his dad was there surfing with them, and he didn't end up surviving a leg bite, I believe it was, pretty vicious one too. I think it was another surfer I had looked into. One of them had a real bad bite to the heel that it almost removed their heel, if I'm not remembering correctly. I went through and reviewed a bunch of attacks for the show, so some of this might be mixed up, but I think the heel that was almost removed was that in that spate of attacks that I just looked into. There's another one that's not even in Australia. It seems to be in like Bahamas area or something like that. That was a fatality that I have to look into. So yes, I don't do these attacks because there isn't enough information, but what I'm going to do now is change this up, and when these attacks, when we get 2-3 attacks in recently, I'm going to go through. So hopefully tomorrow, the next day, we're going to do a show on the recent attacks. We're going to cover these things, and whatever we have, we're going to see what we have, and when I get to covering it for the show, for the spreadsheet, hopefully the new information is there. But we'll start going over these attacks as they happen now. It's going to increase some of the videos, very bad ones that are, the more information, the more likely it's just to happen for a single attack. But like this one where we have so many attacks since we've talked, I'm going to go through all of them and we'll discuss what we know of them now. They just won't go into the books. So now, 1974 was it? No, 1950 again. This is in the Caribbean Sea. There's a Johan Lokstedt, and he's on, do they say what the boat is? Frontenel? The Frontenelle is the name of the ship that he's on, but he falls overboard. He falls himself overboard, and the ship can't find him for 3 hours. So for 3 hours, Johan Lokstedt spends his time fighting off a shark. Now, we've gone over that, the spear fisherman and the tiger shark. He got in that 30-minute battle fighting off the tiger shark because the other spear fishermen on the boat were too far away to hear it scream, so he had to fight that shark off for 30 minutes. This is worse. This guy's fighting the shark off for 3 hours, and it's biting him up. He doesn't have nothing to defend himself. It's just swinging your arms at him and trying to keep him away from you. So they finally make their way back, and they get Johan out of the water, and he is just bitten up. But he survives this situation of, falling overboard, running into a shark, and able to fight it off and stay alive long enough for the ship to get back and get him up and in. Very unusual story. A lot of people survive a long time in the water, but not a lot when they end up seeing sharks around them, especially when the sharks are attacking. So I don't know what size the shark was. Does it say? Yeah, they didn't identify the species of the shark. But I mean, you're talking open ocean. It could be anything from what I think it might be, which is a large oceanic white tip, or any of your open ocean mako, anything like that wants to just sit there and bite on you. Now, like I said, makos usually aren't going to try to take any flesh from you, but that isn't going to help when you're out there for 3 hours rolling around in the water, bitten up all over the place by a shark. I don't know how anybody works like on a boat where you're out there all the time where the boat could go down, that kind of thing, or here where you fall off, or the Austrian knows for his strength throws you off. These stories of the boats, man, no way. I mean, Indianapolis is bad enough, and then you get these kind of things where people end up in the water and they're in a 3-hour battle with the shark by themselves. Not that it helped the people in Indianapolis much, and they weren't with their wits much, but when they were with their wits, it helps to see that you're with your friends and that's close to you at least. Being out there by yourself, that kind of like the family of 4, Billy Horn's parents. Their boat went down in the storm the night before, and they were all clinging to the life ring, and they saw the plane coming in. I think it was a plane, not a helicopter, and they saw it. So they spread out to get its attention, and that's when the boy, Billy, had his arm bitten off, and they had don't do that. If you have numbers, it's best strength in numbers, because any smaller shark, like a lot of, I think, oceanic white tips, if you have a group of you, 4 of them, and you got a little 6-foot oceanic white tip, I don't think it's going to be biting you. I think it's going to be rather hesitant. You spread out though, and it's just you against you, 6 foot against that 6 foot. They don't care. They bite things bigger than them all the time. So that's the other thing people don't understand is the sharks don't see us as we see things as far as size. Like I'm 6 foot tall, so I look at a 4-foot shark and think no big deal. No, that shark don't care. It's going to come up and bite me if it wants to. It's not afraid because I'm bigger than it. So they're a little different with the fear factor on their end. That's like people saying that sharks are afraid of people. They're afraid of them hitting them. They're not afraid of anything once they're attacking. So that's the story of Johan Lokstedt, fighting for 3 hours. Makes me tired. 3 hours of trying to swim or trying to stay afloat is tiring. You add in a shark biting at you the whole time. Forget it. I'm exhausted. Don't want to be around the shark. If you've seen open water, you may want to end up with one of those. At least I would start thinking about it in that situation. That's just awful. It doesn't say how far from land, but you're out there far enough that you can't see land. That's even worse. So not a good thing that Lokstedt went through, but luckily he survives. That's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you join me in a couple days when we go ahead and just do a simple review of all these attacks that have happened in the last 2 weeks, most of them over in Australia, but some over other places. And then join me after that for regular shows. And until then, remember, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.